Imagine being stuck to your twin, but only you want the separation surgery. Frank and Eddie were inseparable. No, literally, like at the hip. Eddie's the big bro, a bit of a bad boy. He's always disrespecting Frank's driving, saying he doesn't deserve his precious Ferrari. He decides to slam on the gas and test out the car's limits. Frank can't stand it when his brother's like this. As they speed down the streets of Los Angeles, Frank can only grip the steering wheel desperately and pray they don't crash. You know, your life would be so much better if you would just see that surgeon, Eddie says casually, as if they weren't flying down the highway at 90 miles per hour. Frank and Eddie arrive at a bar. Their gait is perfect, almost as if they're one person. As they walk in, Frank implores his brother to accept that they are conjoined twins instead of thinking they're freaks. They plop themselves down at the counter, perfectly in sync. Eddie orders a drink, but Frank reminds him that he feels the effects too. So Eddie orders another one. Taking his mind off things, Frank pulls out a book and reads. A woman beside him notices and remarks that she thought she was the only weirdo that reads at bars. Interesting, the book she's reading is Man's Fate, while Frank is reading Man's Hope. Well, golly gee, what a coinky-dink. Suddenly, Eddie barges into their conversation with some crude pickup lines that land flat. Fortunately, Frank shoos him away. The woman is shocked that they are brothers. Meanwhile, Eddie is charming a woman of his own. He then drags Frank onto the dance floor where Marie joins them. The four of them dance together until a spin reveals the truth. They're terrible dancers and Siamese twins. Both women are shocked and flee the scene, leaving the brothers to be ogled at by a disgusted crowd. After, they visit a surgeon to discuss their options. The meeting begins well enough. The good doctor explains that the procedure will involve separating their butt cheeks, which are connected at the hip. He also notes that they have their own set of organs. Despite this, he still cautions that there are always risks involved with this type of surgery, especially since they're working with a dense web of veins and arteries. He says that if all goes according to plan, they should be able to live independently within a matter of weeks. Eddie seems eager and excited, but Frank is more concerned about the particulars. He presses the doctor for statistics, and when he hears the odds are 50-50, he's not happy. Eddie, on the other hand, ecstatically agrees. I guess he's just a glass half full kind of guy. As they go to sign the papers, Frank hesitates. He stares at the pen, thinking about his butt cheeks. He just can't do it. The surgeon retrieves his pen and tells him the pen, along with the knife, will be right here waiting for them when they're ready. Later at home, Frank and Eddie brush their teeth in sink. Are you thinking about the surgery? Eddie says, spitting into the sink without missing a beat. I have to admit, it's got me thinking, Frank says, smacking the toothpaste on his teeth. Eddie looks up through the mirror at Frank with a mischievous grin. It's gonna be great. We can finally relieve ourselves in our own private bathroom stalls. We can take separate exercise classes. I can reach for food without having to worry about smacking you. Yeah, I've thought about that, Frank admits. After all, it would be nice to be able to roll over in your sleep. Or go to cooking school, Eddie adds. Just then, Eddie whips out the papers. Frank grabs the pen, breathing heavy. He drops it. The operation is just too risky. Rage consumes Eddie. He grabs their pants, yanking them down. The bridge of tissue that connects them is on full display. It seems to quiver as Eddie brandishes his knife and threatens to cut them apart himself. I hate you, he cries out. Frank's terrified face reveals that he's afraid the operation will be a success and he'll end up lonely. He just can't live without Eddie, literally, by his side. Eddie brings up the knife and slams it down, but hits the table instead. He despises his brother's weakness. All he wants is to be free from this horrible prison of flesh that binds them. Then, the phone rings. It's Marie, the bookworm from the bar. She apologizes to Frank about her reaction and asks for a second chance. That's how you know what you're watching is fiction. Frank agrees to a second date and Eddie has no choice but to go along. But I'm sure he's gonna make things difficult. Frank and Eddie are getting dressed up for their first date with Marie. Frank has his hair slicked back, his tie is perfectly tied, and he smells like a fresh spring day. Eddie, on the other hand, hasn't shaved in days and hasn't showered in weeks. Eddie agrees to shower and shave if Frank will sign the papers for their surgery. However, Frank still can't commit. Maybe he just likes being built different. I know I do. The three of them walk to the symphony together. Along the way, Eddie makes unwanted advances on random women, much to Frank's embarrassment. After, a romantic dinner takes place. Frank cooked up a bunch of delicious food. You know what they say. The way to a woman's heart is down her throat. Something like that. As always, Eddie butts in, killing the mood and generally making a fool of himself. He's also had quite a bit to drink, which is starting to have its effect on Frank. Marie figures it's getting late anyway, so she heads for the door. Frank follows, or at least to the best of his ability. Surprisingly, they share a kiss at the door, with Frank proclaiming to his brother that he's in love. A few weeks pass and the two lovebirds lay back and have a chat. Though, Marie looks awfully awkward. Frank implores her to just clear her mind and forget about it. Oh, Eddie is doing a plyometrics workout right next to them. Talk about distracting. Out of nowhere, Frank pops the big question. That's right, he's got marriage on his mind. Marie is far too overwhelmed though and runs off. She goes to the bathroom where she's greeted by Eddie's workout partner. As they chat, it becomes clear that they already know each other. It turns out Eddie hired Marie to make Frank fall in love with her in an effort to coax him into signing the papers. The two ladies can feel that their work is almost done. All that's left is the final act. Marie returns to Frank and tells him things aren't working out between them. If only there was something he could do about this predicament. I wonder. Eddie looks on in the background, firing off instructive gestures. It looks like they've got Frank hook, line, and sinker. Marie departs and Frank attempts to chase after her, but he's handcuffed to the bed. Kinky. He digs for the key in his brother's mouth, but by the time they're up, Marie is already gone. Frank, who is usually even-tempered, punches Eddie in the face. It comes as a bit of a surprise, even to Frank himself. But he's so fed up with all of it that he just continues to pound his brother in the chest and head. Every blow landed sends them both flying into a wall or some other piece of furniture. After knocking his brother, and himself, into a table, the glass shatters into a million pieces. But Frank is not done yet. He continues battering his brother, slamming Eddie's head into a set of pans hanging over the kitchen countertop while shouting that he can't live like this anymore. Right on cue, Eddie whips out the papers. And this time, Frank is more than happy to sign. Just then, Marie returns. She sees Frank about to sign the surgery papers and yells for him to stop. Eddie is livid as Marie proceeds to blow her cover, telling Frank that Eddie hired her to make him fall in love so he'd agree to the risky surgery. Naturally, Frank is heartbroken. Dark thoughts race through his mind until Marie reveals that during the process, she fell in love with him for real. They embrace and think about their future together, kids and all. Then, Eddie grabs the knife, raising it high and slamming it down. Frank feels Marie stiffen. At first he thinks she's just nervous because he mentioned having kids, but then he realizes Eddie stabbed her. She collapses while Eddie calls the cops on himself, all with a smug expression. He's confident the cops can't do anything to him considering he's attached to his innocent brother. Filled with despair, Frank prepares a deadly cocktail and chugs it down. As the two brothers pass out, Frank reaches for the papers and signs it with Marie's blood. We cut to Eddie awakening in a hospital. Cops storm the room and read him his rights, though he laughs it off, looking towards his brother, who is still right there by his side. Or is he? The cops drag Eddie away. The beds separate. Frank reveals the surgery was a success. With Eddie gone and Frank forever scarred, he hits on the nurse with the same kind of crude pickup line his brother would have used. Moral of the story? I have no idea.